That's true.
And that's Mike.
And that's Travis Thompson.
How you guys doing?
Great. How are you, man?
Good. I'm happy to be here, and sorry I was a couple minutes late. I didn't realize it was East Coast time, but we'll make it work.
Yeah, I'm happy we did. So I'll read a little introduction about you for our listeners. Travis Thompson is a natural-born athlete who has followed his love of sport down many successful paths. One such path was the love of telling stories, a love that Mike and I both share and hope to highlight through this podcast. After an impressive career in college athletics, both as an athlete and as a coach, Travis turned his passion of storytelling into a career through founding the independent creative company Elevation 0M. This move has garnered over 40 million views of films by Team Elevation across social media, along with a global reach and success in many arenas outside of athletics. We're very eager to hear about your own story today, Travis, and once again, thanks so much for dedicating some time to us today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and excited to kind of share the history of Elevation and kind of how I got to be where I'm at. So.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's a very interesting story, right? You know, we've had a lot of athletes on the podcast, but we haven't had so many who have such a fruitful career. So, you know, when you're growing up in Oregon, I think there's a very, very good history of sport through the state, but very much the running culture is big. And I don't want to talk about running right away because your bio on your website says if you weren't in basketball shorts, I think that's the quote, right? If you were frequently in basketball shorts. So what was that how you started your athletic career? Was basketball the most important thing to you as growing up?
Yeah, basketball was everything to me pretty much until maybe my junior year of high school. Grew up playing hoops, loving it. Somewhere around my freshman, sophomore year of high school, I started to realize that I was 6 foot and skinny, and it was going to be hard for me to get a scholarship or, you know, be able to make it outside of maybe a small Division III, Division II school. So I started running, and my dad was a really good runner back in the 60s for Oregon State University. So he never pushed me into it, but I kind of had an idea that genetically maybe I had some gifts that I hadn't yet tapped into. And I was able to start running for a few years, junior and senior year of high school. And then at that point, I was able to start seeing that I had more natural talent to excel in the sport of track and field than to play basketball.
So before your junior year, you never did track or cross country or any of those sports?
I hated running. My dad would wake me up in the morning and ask me to go on a morning run. And, you know, for me now, that's like, I love running in the morning before work, but when I was younger, I just didn't have a passion for it. But the good thing for me was my dad never forced me to do it. It was always like, hey, you could be really good at this, or, you know, and so I always had it in the back of my mind that maybe I should give this a try someday. But I do think if he would have forced me to do it, I wouldn't have grown to have a passion for it and end up being able to do the things I did with the sport of track and field. So,
what was it initially that sort of triggered the switch or the change in perspective from going from thinking I hate running to having that be the driving force and the driving sport and your motivation for being an athlete? Like you said, it's sort of delicate that you don't want to push it so much, at least from a guardian or parent's perspective, because you can easily just drive somebody to completely hate it. What was it for you personally that changed your perspective on it?
Yeah, I think I had one coach growing up, Coach Hargett. Was from I grew up in a small town on the Oregon coast that we would do PE and stuff like that. And we would do these kind of, you know, these dodgeball games where we do some fun tag sort of thing. And I realized I was maybe faster than most people in my class. And I started to realize that there was a little bit of an ability there. And then when I tried to actually do the sport my junior year for the first time ever, I kind of realized that, oh, hey, this is fun. And the competitive side of basketball that I loved was there with track and field. And ultimately, the reason why I've always loved the sport of basketball, track and field, and even business is I just love competition. And so finding that competition in the sport of track and field was instantly made me be like, okay, this is a new path for me, and maybe need to hang up the basketball shoes and start focusing on seeing how far I can take this sport of track and field.
But I imagine you came into it with some level of fitness, right? You run a significant amount more in a basketball game than you think. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just was at a bachelor party a couple weeks ago when we played 3-on-3. I never really, I played basketball when I was like fifth grade. It was terrible. No ball sport for me. And so like, I didn't realize how much you run. So you probably were going into it with a pretty decent fitness level. What was the first year like as a transition into the sport of running? What were some of the accomplishments you made as your junior year?
Well, I think for me, I picked an event that lended well to basketball. You know, if you're really good at basketball, but then you want to go try to run a 5K or 10K, it's a little bit different. Whereas if you're good at basketball and then you pick the sprinting events, it transfers over, like you said. So I started running the 100 and 200 and then the 400, and very quickly realized that the 400 was I was going to have an advantage in that. So my junior year, my first year of running, I was able to kind of qualify for the state championship meet. And I think maybe even make the finals, but I wasn't able to finish very high up in the finals. And then after that junior year, I think I realized that, oh, hey, like it should be a goal of mine to win state my senior year. And that kind of became my passion. You know, same thing growing up with basketball. It just transferred over seamlessly into the sport of track and field. And I still love basketball, but a lot of the connections I have today with my business and everything is really based off of athletics. So I'm thankful for athletics in general.
And did you accomplish that goal senior year?
I did. Yeah. I was able to win state my senior year, and that was pretty awesome. Just only 2 years running. And then I kind of was like, okay, maybe I could earn a scholarship in college. I always, you know, being an Oregonian, I always dreamed of going to the University of Oregon. And I wasn't able to do it in the direct path that I had hoped. But eventually I did 2 years at a junior college and then was recruited to the University of Oregon and ended up running at the University of Oregon for a few years and had success there that I never would have imagined when I first started running. So
That's a heck of an accomplishment for 2 years into the sport. So
yeah, it was awesome. And then, you know, that dream of being part of the, you know, you got North Carolina basketball, you got Duke basketball, you know, you name it, UConn for women, but for track and field, University of Oregon is like the Mecca, right? So to get to be like a small town kid and get a chance to run for the University of Oregon, really it was a dream come true, and I'm just kind of honored to be a University of Oregon alumni. So
yeah, Drew and I were kind of talking about that before. I was like, man, it's exactly like that. You're running for the most, I would say it's the most prestigious running program out there. So
yeah.
it's pretty cool for especially, is it like UNC, and this might be a little off topic, but if you're from North Carolina, it's very difficult to get into the University of North Carolina because they want to bring in more people from outside of the state. Is it the same thing for University of Oregon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder because I'll never forget one of the coaches, the head coach at University of Oregon at the time. We were at a track meet my senior year, and my high school coach went up and talked to him and said, "Hey, we got this kid that would like to run for you." And he was nice about it, but he was like, who is this? So I remember my coach kind of reported back to me and was like, "Hey, you know, he was nice, but he didn't seem super interested." So I just remember like mentally logging it and being like, okay, so, you know, if you're not going to give me an opportunity my senior year, I'm going to go to a junior college for 2 years. And hopefully at that point, when my name comes up, you actually are interested in recruiting me. And long story short, it took a couple more years, but I think that route of going the junior college way allowed me to then actually get a chance to be recruited and be a part of the program.
That's a smart way to do it, though, because I feel like so many kids get to that point and they don't get the letter from the college that they want, or they don't get the contact with the coach, and then they go to a college and they drop the athletic dream. But do you think that if you had 2 more years of running under your belt, it would have changed? Or is that, you know, maybe you have gotten a little bit more of your name out there freshman and sophomore year, and, you know, what are your thoughts there? Don't really ever think of that?
No, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a mixture of maybe I was a little bit underdeveloped, but the other thing too is when you get a chance to go to the junior college level, it's an in-between stepping stone. So no matter how many years you have in high school, the competition is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And at that junior college level, there's still really good competition. It's not quite Division I competition, but you get a chance to compete at some meets that have some really, really good athletes. So I was able to kind of get like a behind the scenes peek into like what potentially it requires to be a college athlete. And I think that was that was important for me to see. And then it kind of was like, okay, I can actually do this. Whereas in high school, you know, you don't even, people will tell you about college, but you don't even understand like how to, you know, when you've got all these distractions.
Yep.
It's easy to say, hey, I want to go be a college athlete. But then when you're living in the dorms and you've got 5 people saying, hey, there's 4 parties down the street, like it's hard to stay focused. And I just very quickly realized that I had enough of a passion for it that I was able to kind of streamline my vision and be like, okay, like I'm willing to give up and forego some of the distractions that are around in college to excel athletically. So,
and it makes sense though. So now you're at University of Oregon and you put away some of those distractions because you become a captain. And now I was a captain in college as well. And now you get the other side of it where you're focused, but now you're having to wrangle people who might have fallen into the distraction side of it. And it's your responsibility as the captain of that team to drive them to follow that passion and be reinvigorated or say, hey man, it's not working out. I got to see you later. So did you, with a program like that, how prevalent was the dropout rate?
Well, I mean, I think what I very quickly realized is, and I was lucky enough to be able to become a team captain, and it wasn't off of athletic ability. You know, I mean, I was predisposed to be, you know, good at the sport, but I don't have some like crazy world-class athletic ability. I think what I was able to find is like that example of hard work, dedication, being able to be, you know, on time, be kind to everyone. Like those little intangible things for me allowed me to be a team captain on a team that had way more talented people than me. I mean, I had probably, I'll ballpark, there was 6+ athletes in my class that went on to be men and women that went on to be Olympians. Some of them won Olympic gold medals, world record holders. So I am nowhere near as talented as that. But what I realized very quickly was, it was like I said, it was just, okay, like if I set forth that kind of like leadership example and make my name on the team with that almost took me farther than being able to run really fast, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Showing up is, and you're setting that mentality. So you're going to get better just because you're showing up, getting to practice early, stretching, doing things that maybe some of the other athletes that might have more raw talent. And I also wanted to say, you probably have a significant amount of raw talent, only having 2 years of running, then going and becoming the captain and NCAA champion, as well as, you know, you're a pretty talented guy, but I think you got that ability to show up early, get there, and then motivate the other people. And those little things are what get you to the next level without like I mean, like unless you're Michael Phelps and you have 6'8" wingspan, freakishly large feet, all these like weird genetic things, you have to have those things. That's pretty cool though. So
yeah.
what yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think that, like I said, I think it all came full circle in the sense of being able to not get everything handed to me on a silver platter out of high school. Mm-hmm. It was like, hey, like they're not even going to talk to you until you improve. That was a good lesson early on to be like, and I'm not, there's athletes that come in that are great in high school that have a great work ethic, but there are a significant amount of people that do come out of high school and just have, you know, 5-star recruiting next to their name and be these, you know, junior world record, whatever it is. And they get to college and they deal with some hardship and they don't have the ability to deal with adversity. So I think there is a little bit of there's good things that come from that struggle early on, I think.
Yeah. And I think those lessons that you brought rotate us into the next step of your life, which is college coaching. So you had learned these fundamentals, you'd learned these lessons, and maybe you even pushed on some kids that might have wanted to go to, you know, you went to Lane Community College after you graduated as a coach. Maybe you brought some of that mentality saying, hey, why is Lane Community College a great stepping stone for you? Well, we can be that catalyst to get you to the next level. Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think for me, when I started my coaching career, I was excited to start at the junior college level because I knew that there was kids that would go there and end up being, NCAA finalists or get a chance to compete at the Division I level. And so it was kind of the, have you guys ever seen that Netflix documentary, Last Chance U?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's Lane Community College, Last Chance U for the world of track and field. So getting a chance to step into that world and essentially be with these kids that come from, it's not always, but some of them come from, very poor backgrounds, not very good family life, hardship, struggle. Maybe they struggle with grades. Maybe, you name it. Some kids were literally homeless. Some kids maybe lived out of a car or whatever it was. That to me is like, there's no better way to change someone's life as a coach as be with the people who need you the most. And so getting a chance to start at that level was an incredible thing. And then I kind of continued to work my way up from there, but very thankful to start at that bottom level of coaching.
And that to me, so I was doing my research into you earlier today. Sorry, got a baby, full-time job. JP was visiting, so shout out to him. But so I was looking through and I was like, man, first off, we breezed over something else. He also has his MBA from Concordia University in Irvine. So that was a jump in between your NCAA career and then your coaching career, correct?
Yeah, I went and got my master's degree and finished it up while I was coaching at my final coaching stint was at the University of San Francisco.
Okay. Yep.
And I remember, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but essentially as I was finishing up applying for that job, I think there was maybe even a few times where I said I had my master's degree, but I still had like a couple months left. So I would be sitting in the office, like when I first got the job, like literally finishing my master's degree. And then I think I was close enough with my, the people around me where it ended up being like kind of a joke. I was like, hey, I got to go graduate in about a month here. And they're like, oh, we thought you already had it. So
that's like fake it till you make it at its best, but
yeah.
That's funny.
yeah, like what I was saying is that I think it makes total sense. And I was kind of like, man, for such a like successful athlete, I don't understand why you started there. Maybe it's like, I don't know how college coaching works, or if like you have to start at certain schools, but it makes total sense looking back, seeing the journey of your coaching career. And even more so after Lane, you went to Oregon State, and Drew and I were talking before this. I was like, do you think some of the people at University of Oregon like look down on him because he coached at Oregon State? I don't know if there's like a rivalry, but it makes total sense because that's where your dad ran. So like, how cool was that? Was your dad super stoked when he took that job? Like,
yeah, I mean, he was excited for me to be a Beaver there for a little bit. And it was, it's more, I think in the world of track and field, it's so hard to make a really, really good living as a coach that there's really no animosity. In the football world, those head coaches at the Division I level, there's a lot of money flying around. Yeah. You know what I mean? But with the sport of track and field, if someone can get an opportunity to begin their coaching career and be at Oregon State, no one at Oregon really said there might've been some jokes, but it was a move that I had to make and an opportunity that I needed to gain that Division I coaching experience. As much as I was a Division I athlete, you still have to be on the business side of things to really gain that experience. So
that makes sense. And then you went back to Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the choice there?
Yeah. So, I mean, the path was unique because I was kind of bouncing back and forth trying to slowly build up my resume. And I started as an assistant coach at Lane and then was able to go and get an assistant coaching position at Oregon State. But when I went back to Lane, like you said, I ended up getting the title of associate head coach. And so that essentially just was another notch on the cap to build that resume. And yeah, it's just like, any other career, you kind of have to make some lateral moves in order to slowly build up enough to where you want to be.
I want to start bringing in another one of your passions that I picked up on from your about page on your website, which is the passion for storytelling. That seems to be something that was developing all the while during your college career, during your athletic career. How did that love of storytelling come about? When did you start really engaging with it? And how did that tie in with your college and professional career up to this point?
Yeah, so very distinctly when I was finishing up or not finishing up, but I was coaching at University of San Francisco. I remember I bought a camera, and there was times in the evening where I would want to just essentially go around and photograph what was going on in the crazy city of San Francisco. I remember I kind of bought like a little stabilizing gimbal and a Canon camera, and I remember filming like everything from like homeless people to like skateboarders to like there was some musicians who would sit on the street. And then I would take that footage and kind of go back and learn, okay, what do I do with this footage, right? Like maybe I'll put it into Final Cut and learn everything from how to stabilize the footage to maybe how to put it in a timeline, just the most basic preschool. But I was doing this while I was working full-time as a coach. And I remember I made a website, and I had this idea. I was like, maybe I'll take photos of San Francisco and sell prints online. Mm-hmm. And as I did that, I very quickly realized that, in order to potentially do something with this, landscape photography isn't exactly like a booming industry. And so I was like, man, like I have all these connections with the world of athletics, and I really, really love like, ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries. I love movies. And I just kind of started like self-teaching myself. Mm-hmm. And that slowly turned into like being interested in the gear in order to create the stories. And then I think there was towards the end of my stint at San Francisco, I started being like, man, like maybe I could like make a career out of this. And I think I was getting a little burnt out of college coaching in the sense that I'm such an Oregonian, Oregon grown, small town. And in that world of athletics, college athletic coaching, you don't know where you're going to be for the first 10, 15, 20 years. You're bouncing around. Maybe you go over to, the East Coast, and then you go to Florida, you go to Texas. And then eventually when you're 50 years old, you might get your dream job of being like the head coach at Oregon or whatever it is, Mm-hmm. And that started weighing heavily on me. And then when I saw that I could maybe start my own business and kind of write my own rules, that excited me so much to where I took a leap of faith and completely changed career paths.
So if it wasn't just selling landscape photography or just selling prints online, what was your vision for that venture at the time? That's a big leap of faith to abandon that stability and go forward with something that at that point is just sort of an idea, a passion. What was your vision for the future at that point? Enough that you would be motivated to take that leap of faith?
Well, I had a website, and I was back for the summer in Eugene. And I remember I was filming a couple people that I knew close to me that did like really cool things. I had a buddy that was a pilot. I had a buddy that was, an Olympic medalist. I had all these connections that, people would die to have the ability to create content for, but I was able to just say, via text message, I just say, hey, you mind if I come out and film you or whatever? And they were cool with it. And I made a couple things early that looking back now, I'm like embarrassed about, but at the time I was like, I had a few people reach out to me and say, oh, this is really good. Like, I didn't know you did this. And then eventually I think I finally decided to, even on Instagram, I was still putting stuff on my personal. I didn't have a business license or anything. And I kind of took that path of creating a sole proprietorship and creating, paying someone to make a logo, all the things you do to start any business. And it just kind of organically happened. And then I remember a few times people would reach out and say, hey, how much do you charge for this? Or are you interested in doing that? And I was like, oh, okay, like this is something I have a huge passion for, and people are going to pay me for this. And it just, I mean, I was very lucky. I sometimes when I'm explaining it, it sounds like I'm almost like making it up, because it just kind of happens. You know what I mean?
I feel like that's more common than people think, though. You know, you're putting this energy out there, and you're putting all your guard down, and you're like, hey, I love what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to continue to do it. And then all of a sudden it's like one step in front of the other. And then you're doing something for Under Armour or Yeti. And that's one way to grow the career. I mean, that's kind of how we got involved with you. I was like, man, talking to a friend, I was like, hey, we're doing this podcast, we're doing this thing. He's like, I have a great guy you should talk to. He's got an amazing story. And it's true. So you start Elevation. Was your original website you were selling your thought of landscape photography prints? Was that the same website, or did you rebrand yourself when you came out?
No, I recreated the kind of the website, because the website essentially was like, I'll sell prints. And it was like, I mean, it was embarrassing. It was like, I took some cool photos, but essentially what I was doing is I would like take a photo of the Golden Gate Bridge, and someone would potentially buy that photo. And then if they wanted it framed, I was working with a local framing shop in San Francisco and then shipping it out. But it was like,
oh, wow.
The margins weren't going to pay for a mortgage, or, you know what I mean?
For sure.
So it was, I've always been fascinated with business. My dad was a business owner. And the idea of like growing like a company, I have as much of a passion for that as I do storytelling. So when I started to have to sit down and answer these questions of like, how can I scale this thing? I very quickly realized that photography is great for marketing, and there are people that can do a really, really good job having a career in photography. But for me, the bedrock, the foundation of my company had to be cinematography and filming in order to make enough money to not be just a hobby shooter, I guess.
Right. And it sounds like you went into this with like a good, solid concept of having a business plan and a long-term process. And that probably comes from having an MBA, right? You might see this as just everything kind of happened, but it really, when I look at it and 30,000 feet, not 0 meters, right? So I can see all of the things are aligning throughout your career. And so now you make this company, Elevation 0 M, not meters. And you're determining that you're going to focus on the category of cinematography and video production. How did you go from texting, a friend who's a pilot and a friend who's a gold medalist or an Olympic medalist to getting a brand deal? What's that process like?
Well, I think for me, what I very quickly realized was that a lot of people in this industry, or in general, just when you're growing a company, they have this idea that it's going to be able to grow based off of, I'll call it quote unquote, cold calling, or like these emails where it's like, hi, my name is Bill and I offer this service, like email back to me. And when you get those emails, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I'm just like, who are you and why would I work with you? So I kind of took a business model of, okay, if I start my web off with one person, 2 people, and they have a great content that I give them, someone in that web, if the person is special enough, is going to see it and say, oh, damn, who made that? Yeah. So I worked with someone early on that was very involved with politics and natural resources. And like clockwork, I made this piece, and about 2 weeks later, someone came calling and said, hey, you do storytelling, and I fake it till I make it, right? I said, yeah, like all the time. And I had about a month experience. And so we were able to lock down a contract that was, more money that I was making in a career that took me 8 years to get to. And so for me, that was a little bit of a light went off in my head. And not that it's about the finances, but it made me realize that if I could scale this and have a passion for it, there was the ability to take this beyond a very steady salary. With the world of coaching, you kind of know what you're going to bring home every month, right?
Right.
And for me, I was super excited to, for the first time in my life, have that pressure like an athlete, and essentially be like, hey, if you don't do anything, you're going to make $0. But if you work your ass off and become an expert, there's a chance that this has a much higher ceiling than the every 2-week paycheck type thing.
Or lack of ceiling. And you're doing what you love. So
yeah.
I want to go back to that first payment, right? So now you get this deal, and your kind of hobbyist side changes directly to now it's a full-on business. What does that look like now? Are you setting up yourself from like just kind of putting money in a savings account to now, hey, I got to get an employee or two? What is that? How does the scale go from there?
Yeah. So I very quickly wanted to keep my quality high and my overhead as low as possible. And from a business standpoint, I very quickly realized that I wanted to, early on, when I needed help, work with kind of independent like a couple independent contractors that I knew were really passionate, but they had other things going on too. So maybe someone was finishing up school, or maybe someone had another career, but they worked online or worked mobily. And so I was able to kind of deal with the production side of things. And then I brought a couple people on that would help with sometimes when we would travel around the country and need an extra photographer or videographer, or maybe some of the financial pieces of it. I had a few people close to me that would assist me with that. And that helped me kind of like turn it from a startup to like a legitimate business. And then all the things that you would do in any other sort of industry, I started, making the Excel spreadsheets and saying, hey, like in this quarter of this month, these are the industries I'm doing, and this is the amount of income that's coming in. How do we maybe expand out to working with more professional athletes, or how do we expand out doing more stuff in natural resources? And we just became like a student of what was around us and tried to soak up, the same thing as an athlete, like how do you continue to get better? Those are the questions I was asking myself in business too.
And so what is that process like? So you're spreadsheeting it, but like how do you extend your web? It's not through cold calling, but is it like, hey, you're on set with X person? Are you like, hey, if this is something you like, let your friends know? Or just more casual, just let it go?
To be honest with you, this is the way it kind of went down. Is I was able to make content for people that really were someone in their individual discipline.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even have to, it was almost like, hey, will you come out and do this? I didn't even ever have to say, hey, will you let some people know?
Right.
It was almost like I worked with the right people and was able to produce the right stuff to where early on, because our overhead was so low, we just started organically expanding our web to where this person as an athlete connected me with 3 people that were huge connections enough to where those were great clients. And then this person in natural resources connected me with 2 people. And then the next thing you know, I would be in a boardroom and I would be negotiating a contract. And it just, in 12 months, it took off enough to where I was just almost, it gives me like goosebumps a little bit, because I think I don't want to have an ego and say that, it was all me. There was some luck.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very thankful to be able to have the experience I had, because I know that it very easily could have been, hey, I'm making some great content and I'm not able to grow. And I think I got very lucky and picked the right people to where it just took off. And then from there, now it's just about sustaining it and continuing to grow. But it's not quite as much of a massive exponential growth at this point. It's about sustaining and slow growth.
Yeah. And you have, I mean, you've sat in some pretty cool boardrooms, right? You know, it's like Nike, Under Armour, Yeti, Google, Tin Man Elite, a great YouTube channel,
Yeah.
Lululemon, keep hammering. How I would imagine some of these people are people you've looked up to, or you're working with like professional athletes that you're like, this person is like an amazing person. How does it feel to create a business and now you're working with people that you've looked up to?
Yeah, I think for me, coming from the world of athletics, I was always around people that were you could easily get starstruck with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of didn't have that. It was dulled down a little bit to where when I would meet people that I was getting ready to tell a story for or whatever, it was almost just strictly business. And I was just excited to be in the room, but it wasn't like I was asking for their autograph or, it was, I kind of took the approach that like, if I've gotten this far and I'm getting a chance to shoot this person, I deserve to be in the room telling their story as much as this person, vice versa. And that was important for me. And then as we went along further and further, I think we just became more and more confident to where when we get a bigger contract and we get a call from someone that early on we were like, oh man, how exciting is this? Now it's almost like we deserve this in the sense that like we have enough skill at this point to where we're very confident in what we do. And I don't mean that like in a cocky way. I just mean that we have the confidence that we when we get a call from anyone, we feel as though that we can give them what they want.
Yeah, the faking it's over.
Yes.
You've already put the the pen to the paper. You already have your stuff on the out there. So what's the creative?
Let me ask a question real quick. How would you describe your approach to storytelling? Because you're getting contracted to essentially provide a service in some way, and it seems like a very personal service to tell the story of somebody or an individual or even a company. That seems like a very important thing to do, something that doesn't necessarily happen so often these days, where we can just judge somebody by a thumbnail or whatever might be their art on their webpage. What is your approach to telling the story as the person that's providing that service or that product, in a sense, that contract? How do you approach it? Is it largely driven by the client, or do you bring something of your own into that equation?
I'd say that's changed throughout the history of our company. Early on, we were very much like, hey, whatever you need, we'll tell the story that you kind of envision. We've moved more into kind of I don't want to say pure directing, but we now have an opportunity to, if we sit in a room with, let's say, Cam Hanes, mm-hmm. we'll have a legitimate discussion and say, hey, Cam, like, this is what we think the world would like to see from you. And he'll say, yeah, I love that. And let's tweak it. And so there's a little bit of a collaborative back and forth between us and someone as big as Cam Hanes, to where we provide a little bit of direction, and then we come to that happy medium of, hey, if this is the angle we want to do with your story, I think it's going to allow you to do this and this and this. And a lot of times what we look for is all these bigger names, they kind of have the go-to content. We'll use Cam Hanes, who's a very famous endurance athlete and bow hunter. And that mm-hmm. story has been told, right? So if we go and tell that story again, it's the easy way out. And what we did when we told his most recent story is we said, hey, like, we've never seen your mom on camera, or you don't talk too much about some of these darker times of your life. Or like when you talk about getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning, like there's never been a camera crew that's been up with you. So he literally was like, hey, I want to start tomorrow, be at my house at 1:45 in the morning. And I said, let's do it. And so those uncomfortable, lesser known angles for storytelling is like our secret. And I think what's cool about it is, sometimes when you let out your secrets of what you've been able to use to be successful, it's like you're nervous about it. But for me, I'm okay with telling it, because I know that it takes a lot of dedication and motivation to be able to wake up and start producing at 2 a.m. It just, so, I think there's a few people that'll do it, but overall, like, we're proud of being able to kind of put ourselves in those uncomfortable production scenarios. And we use that to essentially tell the stories moving forward. So.
Yeah, to piggyback off that. So what's the creative process to the research process behind that, right? Like, our research process is super simple, right? In my perspective, at least. Like, I go on Google, I Google your name, I go to your website, I look at your LinkedIn, I look at some articles that you might have been interviewed in, but to find out, oh, Cam Hanes, your mom has never been on camera, like, that would be a great angle. How do you get to that point, that research?
I think a lot of it is just getting a chance to get to know the people behind the scenes. We'd worked with Cam before. We had talked with him a little bit. Some of the BeReal interviews that we had done prior that never had seen the light of day, I went back and kind of focused on those and maybe saw topics that made him either uncomfortable or you could tell was like evoking some like emotion, not where he was going to like cry, but it was like, hey, like, that question was differently answered because you could tell that something connected with him. So we try to find those little points. And a lot of it is just kind of that slow getting to know the person. Even with some of the athletes we work with, we'll hop on a call a couple times. Maybe we'll go out to dinner with them, whatever it is. And you kind of they don't realize you're like soaking up information, but behind the scenes, you're like slowly being like, hey, like, if we get a chance to tell this story about this person, that thing he told us at dinner, no one else in the world has ever heard of that. We're going to make sure we pinpoint that when we get a chance to tell the story.
So it's as much relationship building as it is storytelling.
Yeah, totally. I think it's relationship building, and then being able to use that web. Maybe I know Cam's, we keep going back to Cam, but I know Cam's close friend who owns a business in town, or I know this person that knew him in high school, politely asking for the ability to meet these people, and then kind of taking that web back into Cam's story and weaving it together to where the final product is unique enough to where people just haven't had a chance to see that side of someone.
It's a very interesting way to look at it, because I 100% would always see kind of this video content from my perspective. Right now I'm working in marketing, and it's very much the opposite. It's like we do basically a scripting, and then the video is just boom, hey, here it is, it's cut up and it's exactly what you want. And I think that what you do brings a personal aspect into it, and that's what really differentiates your content and maybe draws so many more people into your web, because it's not just the cream of the crop, the cut up stuff from Under Armour that they have today. That's really interesting to see that. So I want to take a little bit of a left turn here and get into the gear and the passion for gear, right? So we understand the passion for the people and the stories that you tell, but there's a story behind how you get there, and how you quite literally get there is one of the cooler ways. So let's start with your van.
Yeah.
What was the choice to, first off, go with the van, and how much research went into it? What kind of stuff are we working with there?
Yeah. So essentially the way that happened is we were slowly saving up enough capital to where we kind of had this vision of maybe taking that leap and opening a brick and mortar. And that was either, potentially finding a good deal on purchasing a building or doing like a long-term lease. And every time we would get with a commercial realtor, or it was always like, it never felt right. It was always like, oh, this would be so cool. Like, I would love to, it'd be an honor to like see our name above a building, and like, but when it came down to like going to bed at night, it gave me that feeling that it was like, this is not a good idea. Like buyer's remorse before buying. And so I always had talked about with my friends, my family, I was like, I want to buy a Sprinter van and like use this as my office. And a couple years in, we were like, man, like, why don't we flip the script and make this to where the elevation van is our mobile workplace, in the sense that when we're traveling around the country, we can't take a building that's up in Portland, Oregon and bring it to Arizona. But what we can do is we can drive to Arizona, have the giant marketing on our van, and be inside the van editing the footage that night after shooting that day. And now that coronavirus has happened, it's almost like we saw that coming and we never did.
Yeah.
So and it gets back to that fundamental piece of our business is keep the overhead low. And yeah, being able to have a van that we own and don't have to make, crazy amount of monthly, lease payments on it or whatever it is. It allowed us to, also to change subjects a little bit, it allowed us to pick and choose stories based off of our passion. And if we would have had a ton of overhead, we would have had to pick and choose stories just to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very important for us. So the ability to relax a little bit and make sure that if we don't maybe get a chance to tell 5 stories in a month, it's okay, because we told one story that really was super impactful and we didn't have to strictly go to where the money was. We could go to where the passion was, and in turn has helped us grow, maybe even more so.
Which keeps you true to the corporate culture that you started, right? You didn't want to go down the path of becoming the CNN journalism style where you're just telling, hey, this is, I don't know, Bob Lee Swagger or someone, right? And you just, that makes sense there. So what's in the van? This is a personal side of what it is, right?
Well, it's a 4-wheel drive diesel. I'm a big car person. So I wanted the 4-wheel drive. I wanted the diesel. And then going back to the build out, we had this vision of building it out ourselves, like cabin vibe. So we knew when we were on the road, it seems like all we're talking about is overhead, but we didn't want to pay for hotels. So we put a little bed in there, and we wanted to have our own work desk, which I still edit on a MacBook Pro. So I wanted to have a nice work desk to be able to edit with a solid state drive. And I wanted to have cubbies that was able to store all my Pelican cases, where we'd have, our DJI drone, and we'd have a nice cinema camera, and we'd have all of our lenses. So it's very basic. There's nothing that's like gonna, be this crazy, like multi-million-dollar home inside or anything like that. But the basics of it is, it's a great place to work from, and it has that cabin vibe to where it's a storage, it's a travel vehicle, it's a sleep vehicle. And every once in a while, when we're traveling around in a city, we'll have clients, maybe we're going from one set to another set. They'll be able to hop in the van. They can travel with us. We can chat with them kind of in more of a conference style. Our van's been used even when we're on set and someone needs to change when it's raining. It can turn into kind of a mobile station for that. So it kind of does it all. And I can't imagine working in my industry. I can't imagine working out of a brick and mortar. I would go crazy, because at this point I can bring my office. If you said, hey, I need you back in New York in 2 weeks time, I can take my house and be back in New York in 2 weeks time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And flexibility, right? Like if you're driving to Arizona, you have I would imagine like a day and a half, maybe 2 days of driving, where if it's 2 people in the van, you can edit while the other person drives. So by the time that you are back at your house, the video has already got a base to it, where the other way, you might have flown or stayed in hotels or other things like that. You're breaking up a bunch of time to get back. Then you got to sit down. Then you're on your emails. And by the time that you actually get to the video, you're maybe 2 or 3 days later. It's a pretty smart move.
Turnaround time is everything. So being able to do that in the van is huge. And some of the films that have been had the most views, or whatever you want to call it, have been partly due to the story, but also just that quick turnaround, where, let's say if something happens, such as a a world record attempt in anything, or let's say like the NBA finals. If the Lakers win the NBA finals and there's a production company that drops an hour documentary about them winning the NBA finals 24 hours after the NBA finals is over, that documentary is going to blow up. And we started to see that. We were like, oh man, like if something happens in the world and then people are like, how the heck did you tell a 20-minute story that quickly? Behind the scenes, what's going on is we're producing in real time and then dropping it. And people are like, man, like I saw the Lakers win the championship last night and I get a full documentary the next day. So that's another little trick to how we're able to kind of grow our storytelling.
That's pretty smart. I like that.
I got a pretty silly question for you. I'm looking at your website right now, and I'm looking at some of the pictures of the van. It looks like you got to take it off-roading a little bit. How was it tossing that thing around in the mud?
It's pretty good. We were those photos is the photo you're talking about looked like we're in kind of like white snowy sand type stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was out. That was another en route. We were going from Oregon to Colorado and back to Oregon, and we stopped in Bonneville Salt Flats.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we stopped out there, and we saw that there was no police around. I think it's legal. And I was like, let's turn traction control off and see what we can do here. So we got some cool photos, and again, it was we were doing a contract, getting marketing content, and then also the other thing I'm starting to realize too as we get farther and farther into this is like it's also just making some like some great like life memories. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's little content things that take you away from like your Instagram. Like that's kind of the medium that you use. It's not always about business. It's like, hey, look at us having fun. We truly are loving what we're doing, and that drives people to come to the channel too, and to the.
Yeah, totally. I'm starting to realize more and more that, you know, once you grow, you know, your business in that digital marketing atmosphere, every little thing you do, whether it's, you know, posting yourself being on vacation somewhere and someone's like, oh my gosh, like I've been there before, or I saw your van in California. There's times where we'll be driving on the freeway and I'll get a DM from someone being like, hey, we just saw your business and we just wanted to say we think it's really cool what you're doing. And that's just traveling around and meeting people. It's a powerful way of marketing, and we kind of forget that in this world of digital, it's like, oh, how much money can I spend on Facebook ads? But it's like, sometimes just going down to your local bar and meeting a few new people might build more than paying a bunch of money on Facebook. So
I just also think it's kind of funny that you're taking this quite literally probably one of the most unaerodynamic and fast cars to the Bonneville Salt Flats, which is like known for records of speed. It's just pretty funny in my mind.
It's beautiful out there. I of the places that I'm not a huge landscape creator, but I will say of the places I've got a chance to go in the United States, Bonneville in the evening is one of the most beautiful places in the country. So it surprised me too. So
I find that funny because we started with a business that started taking landscape photography. it's pretty funny to circle back there. So one other question I had about the video making, is there like a timeline that you guys stick to, and has that changed since you started your business? Because I feel like we're a weird channel where we post a raw video that's we're talking for like an hour right now, and it's just boom on YouTube. And I feel like YouTube now that they changed their algorithm to put 8-minute videos with ads, they're trying to shorten the video, and the attention span of the modern human is getting smaller. Is there a sweet spot that you find on a video that gets out there? Like your 25-minute videos get less traction than a 10-minute video?
That's funny you mentioned that. There's definitely that progression to less total time of content being the sweet spot. But what we try to do is make sure that we kind of ignore what's going on and really just make sure that we're doing exactly if we need to tell a story that's 10 minutes long, we're going to tell a story that's 10 minutes long. And what we can do, and this happens a lot with like larger clients, is they'll say, hey, you shot a 5-minute documentary or a 5-minute short film about this person, can you also give me 6 60-second clips to essentially be like the trailers? Or can you make 3 15-second clips that we can put up? So the ability to, you can never start small and grow big, but you can definitely start with a large film and chop it down in order to use it on different mediums.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we go, is if we have to start big, that's okay. But if you're somewhere and you only have the ability to make 15 seconds, it can be pretty daunting when someone's like, hey, can we stretch this to 2 minutes? And you're like, okay, there's going to be a lot of black screen and music. You know what I mean? So
From having told so many different stories, what have you taken with you as a lesson that has influenced your own story? Or in other words, after hearing all these different stories from so many different people, have there been any underlying themes or lessons that you've taken away? That you
yeah,
hold with you?
I think for me, the thing that I've taken away from all the stories we've got to tell is like, there's always like this crazy struggle or crazy, more real life story behind the success, or the we usually work with, I don't want to say famous people, but public figures enough to where people want to listen to their story. But
Right.
behind those stories, something has happened that's not been so great, or something that's been like a sad story. The same thing with, you know, the idea of Instagram. Like you hop on Instagram and everyone looks like they're like so happy and nothing has ever went wrong in their life. And
It's the highlight.
it's a highlight reel. So I think taking away from that and just saying, hey, like anyone in the world has triumph and struggle, and there's beauty in that, and don't shy away from that. And you know, even with myself, with you know, highlighting some of the successes, there's been struggle, and that's okay, and you should be proud of that. And if you don't have that crazy success paired with struggle, then I don't necessarily think you're going to appreciate at the end of all this. So I'm very thankful to every time I get a chance to tell someone's story, I get a chance to see success and struggle tied together.
Yeah, I think that's rung true on our side too. You know, I think that with the changes in social media and the habits that people have, you know, kids especially come up and they see these TikTok. We talk about this a lot, but they see like a TikToker and they're like, man, that person's famous. I want to be just like them. But they don't realize like that's the highlight reel. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that might not be great. And I think their success is sometimes superficial, but adversity is what builds the character, and that drive to want to be that person and great is what's going to get you there. Not necessarily putting a viral video up and then becoming famous, right? That's not the life that you might want to live.
100%. And, you know, avenues like this, or anytime we get a chance to chat with people, we never hide anything, or we just try to let people know, like, hey, we started this way, we grew this way, and there was a lot of luck, and there was a lot of hard work, and there was a lot of times where like, man, did we make the right decision? And there's been a lot of times where like, man, we wouldn't have had it any other way. So that is storytelling, you know?
You changed my perspective very much so on a lot of it. And it's been an awesome time talking with you. I think the only other question, Drew, do you have other questions? I don't want to cut you into.
I think the last thing I was going to ask is where your story is headed, Travis, where you see your own story going.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I want to continue to grow Elevation and continue to tell really, really impactful stories. I want to use this kind of avenue of film to just continue to find people around the world that when we get a chance to tell their story, it changes someone else who watched it. That's important for me, and continue to do that. And I think in the foreseeable future, the next 10, 15 years, continue to just scale this thing to where when we look back on maybe 20 years with Elevation, be proud of what we did. And then maybe at the 20-year mark, sign off right into the sunset. And that's kind of I always joke. I'm like, I want to do this as hard as we can until we're 50 years old. And then just out of nowhere be like, hey, we're closing doors. Like we're not selling the business. We're just going to essentially put like it's been a great 20 years thing on Instagram, and then just say, hey, so long. Here's a highlight clip for the last 20 years. And then maybe have like a video of us like riding a horse off into the sunset or something.
That would be the most viewed video. Best way to drop your business. Just
riding a horse off into the sunset. I love it.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would close with is like obviously Drew and I are very motivated by other podcasters. One of the greatest is the Joe Rogan Experience. And what was it like for you to have been called out specifically by him for your talent?
I think for us to get a chance to have one of our videos on Joe Rogan, like there's been a few times where like when something happens, we're like, whatever, like running around outside or being like, calling all of our friends and freaking out. That was one of those moments where I was just like, damn, like only a few years in, we were able to produce something that Joe Rogan even looked at.
Yeah.
And that was just like a special moment for me. I still get goosebumps about that. And I think you got to just take those moments and be super, super thankful. Because I think what we're seeing now with coronavirus and all these things is like, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, like nothing is like secure. And so for our ability to even be able to be a small business and continue to grow and produce videos and make income, I mean, I'm just super thankful. And I just things like the Joe Rogan thing, like I'll never forget. And hopefully maybe if I have kids someday, I'll tell them that we had some content on Joe Rogan.
Maybe you'll get there, man. I can see you have a lot of things to say. I'd love to hear you and him talk. I'd like to hear him and anyone talk. It's great. It's an amazing accomplishment. I think your story was super much different than what my notes told me from the perspective. So it was super fun to talk to you. Stoked to have this time, and thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah.
Your story's definitely an inspiration to us. We like telling stories as well. So seeing what you've built is very inspirational. Something good to look up to. It's really impressive. Thanks so much for your time.
Of course, it's cool to see, we have different avenues. Mine's film, but I'm excited to see what you guys do with this podcast. And you guys are so into storytelling with this podcast. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it too. Maybe you guys will be mentioned on Joe Rogan or something someday, or who knows?
That's the dream. Hey, if that happens, I'll be the one riding the horse off into the sunset.
All right, guys. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much, Travis.
We'll link to his Instagram. It's 100% worth a view through. It's great. And then we'll put his website in there too. So thanks guys for listening. And Travis, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, have a great evening. Thank you guys.
You too. Thanks.
You too, Travis.